Good morning, everyone. Assistant Town Manager Andy Clyburn. I'll be filling in for Mr. Els as the chair of the Affordable Housing Growth and Development Trust Board. And we're going to have our meeting this morning, Friday, June 6th, approximately 9 a.m. Real-time access to the Affordable Housing and Growth Development Trust Fund Board is available using the Zoom link and telephone number that was properly posted. As a recording notice, please note that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, the chair will inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Seeing none, I will.
I am taping.
Jillian Douglas,
Yes.
our administrator, is recording. Okay. Moving on, roll call to order. Laura Schufeld,
Present.
Mark Milne,
Present.
Andy Clyburn, present. We'll move into public comment. Do we have any members of the public present that would like to provide comment this morning? Seeing none, we'll jump right into our topics for discussion. Topic number 1, planning and reporting updates from staff. The first one is trust balances and a financial update from Finance Director Mark Milne.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning. Jillian, I think, circulated this morning an updated financial. As opposed to the one that was in your packet. As of the end of May, the trust has just over $102,000 in economic development funds, just under $54,000 in non-CPC affordable housing funds, and about $453,000 in CPC funded affordable housing funds remaining. Any questions regarding that?
Laura.
Yeah, in the commitments, there's a commitment for Housing Assistance Corp for Assistance Resource Center. And I thought there was a presentation about it on a meeting that I wasn't at, but I don't think there was a vote taken, and it actually doesn't comply with CPA regulations because it's not permanent housing. So I'm just wondering if that actually was committed, or if it's because I think it also was for a different site than what they're proposing. So I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Yeah, that one is as you correctly point out, I don't believe the board ever voted that, but we kind of put a placeholder there until we hear back from them. So I put it aside for now, but we can remove it if the board feels it's appropriate to just take it out, unless we plan to have them come back.
Jillian, do you have any information from HAC? Do they plan on coming back?
Well, that was as our meeting discussion when they came before us. When they withdrew for the site that they were proposing, that's when the discussion was that the board was in favor of the project and wanted to see reconsider a different, if they had another location. So it was kind of a support reference, but I agree that might not be a full-on commitment because it's a completely different location at this point. Or I should say, that site is no longer available.
Thank you for that. Laura?
I don't want to have a discussion about it now because it's not on the agenda, but I think it's something that we need to talk about because it's not an acceptable use of CPA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other discussion of Mark's rundown on our finances? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to a discussion of presentation of Community Preservation Act application to the CPC committee. Jillian.
I just wanted to report on Monday, the CPC did vote to support our request for the 2.5 million, and that will proceed to town council for ratification. And I don't have a date yet, but it was well received, I should say. And Laura was there and helped with that presentation. I'm very grateful to have the backup and support. Let's see. I wanted to note that when I presented, I had a different balance that I presented as what was available for, so it's actually even less than what I had said. So I believe at the time I was thinking we had about 800,000 remaining, and we do not.
Okay. Laura?
Yeah, just to, um, I was at the meeting. I did respond to some questions from, the member from the planning board, Steve Robichon. But also there was a desire for the CPA to have a joint meeting, that included, obviously, Mr. Els would be there as a trust member, but they also wanted to talk to him, about, priorities around their whole CPA, monies. So just to throw that out there, I didn't want that to get lost, or, they actually would like to have, like semi-annual, joint meetings, so, or some members do. I think they voted that they wanted to do it.
Okay,
Some were more interested than others.
understood. All right, we'll take that under advisement. Anything else on that, Jillian?
No, I think that's, I also, I had provided them a little bit of information about what the town council subcommittees had, what they were reporting out to the town council, and I just brought forward those, the recommendations so that they had that. I'm sure they were aware of that, but, it's all relevant. And now with the local comprehensive plan, going forward, it's just a change in scenery, if you will. And so I want to make sure that we incorporate and stay involved with everything they're doing.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Laura, for going to the meeting. Appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is project updates. Jillian?
See, I was just thinking that I would have an update, but I actually don't have a whole lot. With 199 Barnstable Road, to my knowledge, has not closed yet. So we are waiting. They had thought they would have closed by now. So I was hoping to give you a report on that, but
Okay.
that has not happened. 11 Potter is, I think, also waiting for a closing. And other than that, I think I don't have really anything new to report on projects.
All right,
Um,
okay, moving on.
I think that's all I got. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had more, but.
Does anyone else have any questions for Jillian? Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda is funding award clarification request, wind development, 307 Main Street, Hyannis, loan versus grant. We have a project leader, Angela Guile, and applicants consultant, Rob Brennan. Jillian, do you want to tee this up?
Well, I am glad that they are here to present. In your packet, I had given you the table that was intended to indicate the difference between, or I should say the tax consequence, the difference between a loan and a grant. And I think I'm going to hand it right back over to Angela to present what their specific request is.
All right, Angela.
Great. Thank you, Jillian. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Guile, and I'm with Wind Development, working on the Harborview project at 307 Main Street. And just a clarification, I'm joined today by John Smolik, Rob Brennan, who I think many of you know is out of town today. So we've got John here. So have met with some folks at the town, some folks on this call about the prior really great award of the $2 million from the trust to support the 307 Main Street project, which, as a reminder, will be 120 units, new construction building at 307 Main Street, Hyannis. Why we are here today is to go over the implications of receiving the trust funds as a grant, which is how things are currently, which was how it was awarded and how things currently stand, and our request to the trust to actually have that come into the project as a loan. So still $2 million in a loan. So I'll get into that in a moment. But also just while I was here, wanted to just also provide an update on the project, since I know many of you are familiar with it. So back in February, the project received all of its funding awards from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And we do plan on the financial closing occurring in the first half of 2026. So stay tuned on when you can see shovels in the ground. We will make sure to let you all know. So if it's okay, Jillian, can I share my screen?
Yeah, I think Sarah has given you permission for that.
Great. Can folks see? Okay, great. So what I will go over the next few minutes will really be, I want to kind of qualify it with it's a really, really simple illustration to illustrate the point of being able to structure funds as loans instead of grants for a typical tax credit deal. So I don't want to get hung up on, there's a lot of assumptions here. I tried to just make it as simple as possible for illustration purposes. And the conversation today is one that we actually have often with municipalities to kind of, just discuss. A lot of times municipalities or other organizations do offer grants, which is a great resource for projects. But it's just when it is specifically a project being funded by tax credits that, and I'll show you this, how grants actually can negatively impact the project and you don't actually get the full amount of the grant that's awarded. Whereas if you're structured as a loan, you do get the benefit of actually receiving the full amount that was awarded. So I'll run through this. And in the 307 Main Street project, I would say is primarily being funded by federal and state low-income housing tax credits. So we do have what's called an equity investor who pays for the credits, and that's the equity that comes into the deal, and that is a large part of the capital stack. And then we have a lot of other sources from EOHLC, loans, permanent financing, construction financing, and then the $2 million from this trust. So what I'm showing here on the left-hand side, this column, is an example of how when $2 million comes into a project being funded by tax credits, how that $2 million helps the project's total sources. So under this scenario, I'm showing, great, we got $2 million and it's coming in as a loan. And what I'm showing here is for illustration purposes, I'm assuming a 4% tax credit project with a total development cost of $50 million. This eligible project cost is one of the nuances that I'll explain more over here in the grant scenario. And I'm assuming that for this project, it's 100% affordable. So that's what this 100% means for this illustration. So I have an annual tax credit amount of $1.8 million over 10 years. So, and I'm going to get an equity investor to pay $1 for all these credits. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have $18 million as a source for the project in this scenario, coming in from a tax credit investor. The same exact project and the same exact example over here, but I'm going to show the difference that happens if funds actually come into a project as a grant instead of a loan. So I have the same $2 million right here, but what happens because of tax rules is that when you have a tax credit project receiving a grant, you actually have to reduce your total amount of eligible project costs that you can take tax credits on, you have to reduce it by the amount of a grant. And that's specific to a grant and not a loan. So for example, every resource that we are receiving from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, those are all loans. And by and far, I think a part of that structuring is because of this right here. So, okay, I had 45 million in eligible project costs, but now that's 43 million because I just had to reduce that 2 million. All of these assumptions down here are the same. I'm still assuming I'm going to get a dollar in pricing, but because I reduced it by 2 million up here, my annual tax credit amount that I'm multiplying by 10 years, as you see, went down from 1.8 million to 1.72. So at the end of the day, the total amount of equity that I'm getting in this same scenario is just 17.2 million versus the 18 million. That's kind of issue number one with grants. And then issue number two with grants is that you also have to pay taxes. If you receive a grant to the project, the partnership has to pay taxes. So I'm just put this estimate right now of 21%. 21% of $2 million is $420,000 that the project would have to pay. So for a kind of apples to apples comparison, at the end of the day, with a grant, you can think about the total amount of funds entering this project is 16.78 versus the 18 million over here. So it does have a big impact to the bottom line of the sources for the project. And I think in these scenarios, everyone's intention is that the project is actually able to receive that 2 million to help support the project. We, in our conversations with council, we've kind of gotten a little more into the weeds of how this is actually papered and structured when things are a loan and what we have to do with interest rates and resubordination and payback and whatnot. So happy to get in the weeds there, but tried to, again, make this as simple as possible to illustrate the point. And this might pertain to other projects that you're looking at as well, now and in the future. So I hope this was overall helpful in that regard as well. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the trust board? Mark?
I appreciate it. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angela, for that great presentation. Very, very clear. And my question is, if we structure this as a loan, when would the trust be paid back and how would that work?
Yep, that's a great question. So typically, what we see for loans, and again, other examples include resources from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, is that there would be a note, and there would be a 0% interest rate and a term of the loan, in this case, a term for the $2 million of the trust. And someone like Wynn plans to own and operate this property for the long term and keep it affordable. So we would predict at some point in the future, after the LIHTC compliance period's over, say 15 years, 20 years, somewhere along there, we would probably try to refinance the deal and kind of do a big capital project. At that time, what we like to see in the deals is an ability to resubordinate any of the loans that are in the deal. So any of the stuff from the state or local. So that allows the money to actually just kind of keep staying in the deal. Now, in the event that the deal ever completely, the term expires and or the affordability restrictions like wear off, and at that point you'd have to pay back the loan. In that event, the money would actually come back to the trust, the full $2 million. I think we were proposing a 0% interest rate here. That's typical, so it really would be the $2 million. But I guess my point is that the intent for affordable housing long-term owners is that you actually, keep the loans and the deal and you resubordinate them when you go to do a capital project and re-up all the affordability restrictions. But in the event that doesn't occur, I think the terms we're talking about here are 40 or 45 years. That's typical. If at that time the project got out of affordability, then the money would come back to the trust, it would come back to the state.
Thank you.
Attorney Galvin? Laura?
Yeah, Angel, this was a great demonstration and explanation of this. I try and explain this a lot of times, and um, and so I appreciate you simplifying it to down to the core of what we're talking about. So just something obviously that I work with a lot, and communities often don't understand the difference. They think they're doing the developer a favor by giving them a grant. So you have to flip the thinking. So I appreciate the demonstration and the example, and I fully support it being a loan.
Thanks, Laura. Attorney Galvin?
Yes, Angela, could you just tell us what would happen, hypothetically speaking, 10 years out and the project is sold?
Oh, sure. So we have the so one specifically for this project, I can assure you that will not be happening. But hypothetically, in this project, when development we are long-term owners and operators. So we are expecting the affordability terms for this project to again be 40 or 45 years. That's typical for a project receiving a bunch of different sources from the state and trust to support the affordability of the project. So in the event of sales, all of that has to be inherited if a sale would happen. So if it happened, before years 40 or 45, then everything would have to be inherited.
The expectation would be that the loan that was made would be
assigned.
Extended to the buyer.
It would be, yeah, I think technically I think it's an assignment.
Right.
Yeah.
Angela, could you stop sharing the screen?
Yes.
That's better. I can see everyone a little bit better. I really appreciate the demonstration. It seems pretty clear the benefits. My question is, you say you've had to explain this to other municipalities. Why in this case was it not explained up front? I mean, we try to always make our policy decisions not on a project by project basis. So it's a little bit difficult because we've already awarded the grant and now we're looking to change course. Do you give thoughts to trying up front rather than after where we are today?
Yeah, very much appreciate that question. I think this is my first time speaking with you all. So I actually did not work on the original application for this. And I think as I went back and talked to my coworkers who did, I think there was just an unfortunate assumption that it was a loan. Because we looked back in all the documents and I think that's what happened. So that is an oversight on our part. I think if we had realized that the intent was for it to be a grant, we absolutely would have raised this ahead of time.
Okay, thank you. Jillian?
Hey, I just wanted to say that I clearly conveyed that it was reimbursable, but I think Wynn always from the start had sought a loan. They had asked about it. And I think, unfortunately, I sort of said that's not a possibility. And so I think it kind of got lost. So I don't know if that's that may be why it hasn't been a formal request, is because it is not something you've done before. And so I assumed that the trust would not be doing I mean, we've had conversations about the potential for this, but I think we've always landed back on we haven't done it before and it would be a policy change.
Yeah, okay. Any other discussion from board members on this? All right,
You want a motion?
yeah, I kind of expressed my concern. It seems like something that the board would support. It's just, we always are cautious in setting new precedent policy on a project by project basis. So, my druthers would be to take it under advisement and to, vote it at our next meeting. I don't know what timeline, how much of a negative impact that may have to the developer. Laura, if you have matters, so I'd like to hear them.
I think that had this is the first project that we've done that's been LIHTC. Had it come up sooner, it would have been discussed sooner as a policy. Um, you know, I think in every case on a LIHTC, we're going to be asked for it to be a loan. And so I think it is a policy decision, but I think it's a no-brainer. It's what gives otherwise they'd be asking for more money. In order to fill the gap as a grant, they would need more money. They have a gap in their financing now as a grant. So to me, it's a no-brainer that it should be a policy change. I don't think we're doing it for this project alone. I think we do it for every LIHTC because otherwise we'd be giving them more money. And so I'm ready to vote on it now as a policy change, not as, in particular for this project, but as a policy change that because we don't have anything, if it's funded by this or if it's funded by that right now, but I think that it would be a grant, and is received by other developers that aren't doing LIHTC, they're in a better position to have a grant. But in this case, in LIHTC projects, that it makes a big difference. And I don't know. I don't think there's a downside to voting the policy.
Attorney Galvin?
You're muted.
I think the only thing that becomes difficult for us is that a lot of us won't be around in 40 years or whenever this loan gets repaid, and just being able to track when something is due is kind of the most difficult thing for a municipality. So we'll have to do something that keeps this on an annual report on an annual basis so that we know this is out there and when it's coming due.
And
Oh, okay. How about Laura?
I'm just gonna say, well, if the town is doing what they're supposed to be doing, they will be monitoring it annually. So I would expect that we would be on top of it annually, both in the affordability compliance, and obviously with if we can't, if we can't keep track of a $2 million loan, then I would question why we're giving them.
Thank you. Mark Bell?
Yeah, well, certainly when, this payment is made, it will be recorded as a loan receivable in the town's financial records that will permanently be there, with the backup supporting documentation in the file for whoever succeeds us down the line. So, but to Attorney Galvin's point, somebody's got to, question that or keep an eye on that from year to year, to make sure they just don't ignore it, because it could be ignored if people aren't diligent. But to Andy's point, this is policy change. But I think what Angela shared with us today was very clear, makes a lot of sense. I think that's the only way we can do these projects going forward. And I would support acting on this today.
Okay. Well, I see a 2/3 absolutely feels we should act on it today. So do I have a motion?
I'd make a motion that we convert the grant awarded for 307 Main Street Hyannis project to a loan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a first and a second to convert the grant award into a loan. Laura, you have a discussion on it?
Yeah, I would put in that at 0% interest for a term of at least 40 years. That'll get negotiated, I'm sure, the term to coincide with HLCs. So things aren't, terming out at different intervals, but I think we should put the 0% interest in the motion.
Okay, Mark, are you okay with that motion as amended?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'll have a roll call vote. Laura Schufelt,
Yes.
Mark Helm,
Yes.
Andy Clyburn, yes, that passes. Thank you very much for the presentation, Angela. That was very well done.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, have a great weekend. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. It is a request for release of Phase 2 award holdback, CCR Holdings, LLC, 50 Yarmouth Road. Jacob Dewey. Hey,
Hi,
Jake.
Jeffers.
Jacob.
Julie, do you want to go or?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can just introduce that in the packet was the letter requesting the phase 2 release of funds. And Jake has provided information that I circulated again earlier this morning. And I will just pass back to Jake, just setting that up, that you should have some information in your packet already.
Yeah, basically, I was back. We released the first phase of funds when we were in construction. Construction's complete now. All the units are occupied. It took a little while to get to get through applicants through the lottery list to get someone qualified to move in, and they could come up with deposits and things like that. But we are fully leased, and the affordable units are rented. Lori at Barnstable Housing Authority is doing the monitoring, and she did the income qualification for the applicants. So I just wanted to sort of close that out. We would leave that remaining funds there for the 3 units that are still occupied. And again, Lori is still income verifying those people continuously to make sure they stay within the right income bracket for those units. So yeah, just requesting to release this next funds. I think I've given Jillian everything. All the deed restrictions and all that was recorded back before we did the last release. But if there's anything else that you want to provide, I'm happy to do so.
All right, thanks, Jake. Do we have any? Mark Mellon, please.
Thank you, Andy. Can someone explain the discrepancy between our SHI filing showing 1 unit at 80% AMI versus what the Housing Authority submitted at 100% AMI?
Laura?
The SHI only goes up to 80%, so the 100% unit would not go on the SHI, the subsidized housing inventory, only 80% and below.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jake?
If I could, so the 65% unit is also on the SHI. So you have 2 units that are on the SHI, and the 100% are not yet.
Okay, Laura?
So we have the application for the SHI, but I'm wondering if it was accepted.
Is Corey still here? Corey, I would defer that to you.
It's excuse me, it's been submitted but not accepted yet. Onto the SHI. The new units forms have been submitted.
That's not unusual. There's 2 people running that department right now.
Yeah, it's like a 2 to 3 month
No,
review time at this point.
it's closer to 6. seriously.
No, no, yeah, I believe you.
Yeah. So, okay.
Or in your opinion, is that something that a hurdle that needs cleared? Or is that something that we can get after the fact, now knowing that the application is complete and submitted?
Yeah, I reviewed the documents and everything's there. So, it's, it's a staffing issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, do we have any more questions for Jake? All right, do I have a motion?
I'd move to approve the release of $150,000 for phase 2 in the Linnell Landing development. Is that correct?
Yep.
Question, was it 150 or 170? What was the first?
150 because 20 is being held back until the other
20
three
is not
turn
back.
over for the lottery expense.
Second, I'll second that motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, Laura Schufelt,
Yes.
Mark Milne,
Yes.
Andy Clyburn, yes. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to item 4 on today's agenda, the proposed amendment to the 2020 Trust Declaration to allow for acceptance of Commonwealth Builder Program deed restrictions. Attorney Galvin, I think you sent us something this morning.
I did. The amendment that I proposed is an amendment to Article 6 of the first amended Declaration of Trust. And before I created the second amendment that the trust board would then sign, I thought I'd show you the amendment. And I'll just go over again why I think it probably needs its own little paragraph because it's a little different than regular CPC funds. So it sounded to me like we were all in support of the Commonwealth Builder Production Program, which, as you may recall, was designed to assist first-time home buyers and condominium buyers. Those condominium buyers, in order to be eligible, have to earn somewhere between 70% and 120% of the area median income. There are some minimum size requirements for Commonwealth Builder Program financing, and for condominiums, it's roughly 15 units minimum in a project, and for single family homes, it's 7 minimum units. This is a restriction that's a little different. It's a 15-year restriction, and then at the conclusion of the 15 years, the person that buys these properties has to basically split the equity with the people that support it. For example, us, if we were the supporter. So, and then there's no more restriction, but we get, some money back against this. The major issue for us was because we're funded principally by the community preservation funds to somehow run afoul of the community preservation law and the restriction that all restrictions have to be perpetual. And you may recall, we spoke about this before. I had checked with Stuart Saginaw at the Community Preservation Coalition. I had researched the other projects that were done in other gateway communities like Barnstable that use CPC funds to kind of figure out how they did it. And I can put up on my screen that one paragraph if I have the ability to share. I'm not sure I do, but if you all looked at what I sent earlier today, I added a new paragraph 2 under powers of the trustees. And it was to support the creation as opposed to the acquisition of single-family homes and condominiums that are affordable to households with low and or moderate income housing through the Mass Housing Commonwealth Builder Production Program or similar programs, provided the funds are distributed in accordance with General Laws Chapter 44B. So I created a very broad power that allows the trust to support the creation of affordable housing, but it's not the acquisition because we're not acquiring anything. We're just supporting the creation by other people of this. So the significance to us is when we receive an application from someone with Commonwealth Builder programs, they're going to have to demonstrate to us that the funds we're giving them are not used to acquire the property. Um, they're used uh, basically to subsidize the ability of purchasers to make these first home and first condominium purchases. And there is a preference that we can decide to adopt to disproportionately impacted households. That's households that are low income or receiving any type of federal or state aid for food or um, housing assistance, things like that. But that's an option for us. Um, my guess is that some of the people that are going to be eligible will probably receive some form of those subsidies anyways. So I thought this was the broadest way to do it, added as its own authority to make sure that it was separate and distinct from your other powers. I thought it was worthwhile rather than to have to amend the trust every time the Commonwealth comes up with a different financing program, maybe to say, or similar programs, and to include the caveat that it always have to be compliant with Chapter 44B. And it is my opinion, and I know I wrote that opinion earlier, that because we're supporting the creation as opposed to the acquisition, we can provide our funds consistent with 44B that way.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Laura?
So, of course, I'm just reading this morning, so I'm I'm not sure I'm going to be prepared to vote on this. Um, so by adding the support rather than supporting the development, um, you are it it circumvents the CPA requirement for perpetual if it's an interest in the property. So my question is, I got a lot of questions. A lot of people know about this at
Yeah.
the Housing Institute, and a lot of people don't agree with what the town's doing. Let's put it that way.
All right.
Um, and um, so when would the money come in? Because if it's to support the first-time home buyers and it's support under CPA, then it wouldn't come in until you were reducing the sales price. Is that correct?
The developer would have had to already acquire the property.
But the property is the land. If this is going into the real estate, in developing the units, they're not buying, they're not acquiring the done units. So it has been interpreted that, if you're supporting the development of the units, that's an interest in the real estate in the past.
Yeah.
So I, you know, I support the Commonwealth builders, but I also support, the need for, perpetual, and we were going to get around it by trying to have a fund, to be able to buy the units and extend the affordability. So I'm just a little concerned that by putting it has to be in compliance with Chapter 44B, that that you're opening it up to some, I mean, enforcement for CPA is almost non-existent anyway. But there's certainly a lot of questions out there, and I don't know.
But like a 10 taxpayer group could come in
Yeah.
and say that this is not legal, but once the money gets advanced, those types of lawsuits are untimely and they can't succeed as a matter of law.
Right.
I had the same concerns that you did, Laura. So I'm not like, um, and I think when I initially thought about it, I thought about the exact same way that you did, is this is probably not something we should be involved in. But that's why I spent that time on the phone with Stuart and asked him how he's doing it. And, I think he's trying to expand what they can offer, and find a way consistent. And What he explained to me was because you're not supporting them in the developer in the acquisition of the units, it's their view that you don't have to have that perpetual restriction. It's like offering down payment assistance in the form of a grant to an individual homeowner or something like that. That's the way he was kind of explaining to me. And he did say he sees you all the time and he was happy to talk to you about it. But um, that's
Well,
I
yeah,
took some convincing too. So
yeah, if I could, sorry.
Absolutely, Laura, please.
Um, I think I think we have to, if you're going to use the support category, then you can't say it's supporting the creation because creation requires a perpetual restriction because you have an interest in it's all around the interest in the real estate. So if we were supporting it by it being um, reducing the costs of soft costs, then I can kind of, I'm sure there's $2 million of soft costs. But if it's supporting the construction costs, I think it then would require perpetual. And I think it's just um, I don't want to, I don't want you to think that I'm bringing this up for the first time. I think it was in the amendment calling out 44B. Um, I think just kind of puts a spotlight on it.
so the language that you find potentially problematic is as distributed in accordance with chapter 44B.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can talk our way
So what I
around it. I
so
just
what
don't
I
want to
did
put
is
it in the document.
just so you know where I got the idea for this language is I actually looked at the Lowell, I looked at an Amherst, I looked at the actual votes taken by the community preservation committees, and I read their meeting minutes. And
Okay,
they were actually having this very same discussion that we're having right now. And what they settled on was very close to what I have here. And I don't think
okay.
I care personally if it doesn't have the last phrase in there, provided it distributed in accordance with chapter 44B. I just wouldn't want somebody to think that we're not paying attention to that either.
Yeah.
And I think that given the interpretation given by the coalition, which I could support, yeah, I wasn't afraid of including it. That was my rationale.
Okay.
So Bob, I apologize. Could we just back up a second and have
Yep.
you share your screen to pull it up?
Sure.
We're having a pretty robust discussion
Yep.
on camera and no one else sees what we're talking about.
Okay. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, I don't know what you're seeing on my screen.
So what we're seeing the
Can you see the
article
can you see the red line here?
Yes.
to support creation as opposed to acquisition of single family homes and condominiums that are affordable to households with low and or moderate incomes through the Mass Housing Commonwealth Builder Production Program or similar programs, provided the funds are distributed in accordance with General Law, Chapter 44B. And it sounds like that last piece, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 44B, is potentially problematic in Laura's opinion. Am I articulating that properly, Laura?
Yeah, I think first of all, it then implies that everything's going to be using CPA to, you know, we do have other sources of funds, not a
Absolutely.
lot, but we have the, you know,
Absolutely. I was going to say it's a shame that we don't have a similar proportion of non-CPA, and that would make this a much easier
yeah,
discussion. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So the CPA 44B has kind of what you can and can't do with each of the different buckets of money of CPA. And um, community housing is the only one that has support as one of the things. There's acquisition, creation, rehab, and support. The one thing you can't do with housing is rehab with some caveats. Um, but you can support. Um, but what I'm saying is you can't support the creation because then you're into the create, and create needs a perpetual in my non-legal but
Yeah,
experience. And from, the discussions that I had over the last couple of days with folks asking me about it. So
so Laura,
they didn't have this language, but
do you have any other alternative language that would replace provided funds are distributed in accordance with chapter 44B?
I would say I would take chapter 44B out, and I would say uh, provided funds are distributed in accordance with trust funding sources or something like that. And just pull out.
Attorney Galvin, do you have any suggestions of what that reference would be? What trust guidance?
I don't actually think I don't think we have to have that last phrase in there,
Okay,
provided the funds are distributed if that's an obstruction. I still think it applies, but I think we could take that
we're
whole
not calling
phrase
it
out,
out. Right.
I think it applies too. I just don't want to say it.
highlight it.
Understand?
Can you see the change that I just struck through
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be willing to, just put the colon there at the end of the word or similar programs.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
and I think that would probably do it. I don't think it makes a major difference to me as an attorney, but if it helps Laura with rationalizing it, or not highlighting it, I think that's fine. So,
Laura?
Yeah, I think that's okay.
All right. Mark?
I'm good with that.
All right, so procedurally, do we need to have a motion and a vote on this?
yeah. So what I'd suggest you do is approve the amendment. I will take your first amendment and I will come up with a second amendment and have it ready for endorsement by the trustees at the next meeting.
Fantastic. All right, that's what we'll do. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to item number 5 on today's agenda. Update on seasonal communities designation under the Affordable Homes Act, benefits and requirements of designation.
I think that's me. Can I, Sarah, can I share?
Everybody.
ahead. You can go
Everyone
right
can-
ahead.
Okay, thank you. Whoops. I gotta get the share up here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Share. Where is it? Let's see. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right, let's see if I can find it. It should be in my screens. No PowerPoint. Let's see if it's down there. Ah, there it is. No, still can't see it.
Not yet.
Ah, there it is. I had one more
There we
sheet
go.
for you.
Eureka.
All right, now I have to see it. Okay.
We
No?
are just seeing your ribbon at the top, not the whole.
You not
There
seeing
we
the whole
There
thing?
we go.
We
Let's
can
see.
now. Yep.
Yeah, let me open it up. Maybe. Doesn't want me to do this today. Yes. Is that better?
Not yet.
Yeah, we
That's
can.
Yeah.
a little better, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But how about that? Is that better? That's about as
think
big as I
fine.
can get it.
There we go. That's a little better.
Okay. Let me put you.
Laura, if you click there's an icon on the bottom that looks like it's like a square on a stand. It will put you into presentation mode, so we don't see the top bar, and it will fill the screen.
Down at
The
the bottom.
bottom?
right? Yeah.
I don't have anything. Well,
That little thing that looks like a projector screen.
that wasn't
just-
it, right?
Nope. I want to say it's the, it's
I can skip
right
it on
Down
next
on the
to the,
bottom, it's to the right of the thing that looks like an open
Oh,
book.
there you go.
is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I do this a lot. I don't know how I'm messing up. Okay. So the seasonal communities advisory commission met a couple weeks ago to go over recommendations from the three working groups. The three working groups have been made up of members of the commission with staffing from EOHLC, the Executive Office of Housing and Living Communities staff, and me. So we worked for about 6 weeks on recommendations from the three working groups, and so I'm just going to quickly go through what the recommendations are.
I think you
And
have to click the slides. I'm sorry, Laura.
yeah, I haven't moved down
You
yet.
got it. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
I can go in slideshow. That's probably better for you guys. Um, so,
There.
so one of the so these are recommendations that the recommendations for regulations that are going to be drafted based on the recommendations and then will be brought back to the advisory council. So, and the timeline right now is to have regulations by September and it has to go through a public process and hopefully the advisory council would be approving them in December before the end of the year. So the recommendations for definitions and data analysis. What this is, what does it mean to be a seasonal community? And then for those who were not, like Barnstable, were not automatically designated because in Barnstable County, you had to have over 35% of your household stock seasonal, and Barnstable's at 28%. So we didn't meet the statute definition. So now how else can people come in? Because there's a caveat in the statute that the secretary can add other communities who don't meet that definition. So the first recommendation was defining and calculating statutory metrics. So in the statute, there was short-term rental data. If you had over a certain percentage, it just really said short-term rentals in the statute. But if you had enough of them, so that this working group worked through what um, what the scales would be. So Barnstable doesn't really meet this because our percentage of of short-term rentals is about between 2.5% and 3%. So it's not going to be that low. But there are other factors. Second homes, we certainly do. The disparity between income and home sales price, between what the median wage is and what you need to buy a house. So they decided that there would be these different data points. So and then it was like, okay, so there's 5 or 6 different data points. How do you get in? Well, you can't say just one because the disparity between income and sales price, would pretty much put most of the state in it. So they came up with a combined score of 3 of high or higher. You have to meet those data points. And then how do you request? So if you have 3, then you can request it from the secretary. And then if you don't want to stay in, how do you do that? And they're saying rather than you need just a majority to get in, but you'd need 2/3 to get out. There are both requirements for seasonal communities and options. I should have started with that. So they suggested a process for getting out um, and also to clarify when the process, if you are still voting, if you're voting on it, but you haven't approved it, through town council, do you still get the benefits? So those were kind of their questions. The next working group was tools and requirements. Just what I said, there's some that are required, there's some that are tools, and hopefully there'll be some that are funding. So the tools, one of the requirements is that you have to make undersized lots able to be built on. What I think this is within the statute, and it says that undersized lots are no larger than 10,000 square feet, which is the density requirement of 40Y. But there was no one on this committee until I came on late that said, well, if it's septic, you can't build it on a 10,000 square feet because you need 10,000 square feet for one bedroom. So if you had exactly 10,000 square foot lot, you could do a one bedroom house. So they're going to work through that and see whether they can whether they can further define undersized lots for non-sewered areas. And then the next thing that you have to do is you have to permit tiny homes. And so now there was kind of the what does is mean with permit. And a lot of discussion about this, and I don't think there's been any real resolution, but we're going to try and do regulations anyway. The other must have is you must allow uh, provisions that support housing for artists or other community members in the creative fields. What does that mean? So again, another definition, and they're suggesting that it be broadly defined and that they then become part of the local preference in any lottery. There's also in the statute to allow housing that preferences public employees. This is still kind of going through a fair housing lens with attorneys. So we have to, and it says essential workers. And so it's like you have to define essential. And we certainly define essential within our public employees. But what about volunteer roles like where there's volunteer fire in Western Mass? And then how long do you have to actually accept these and put the requirements in? When do you have to change your zoning to allow tiny homes? Tiny homes right now, the definition is less than 400 square feet, but guess what? That doesn't meet the building code. So again, sometimes statutes are written without fully vetting with other constituencies. So the timeline for implementation, I think, is going to be between 18 and 24 months. And withdrawing window would only happen at the end of 24 months. And waiving requirements is a provision that the secretary can waive requirements. So there's some talk about how to do that. If they, if they meet other housing production or different different requirements, kind of what does the secretary have to take into consideration? And if you have waivers, what else do you have to do? So if you take something away, do you add something? And then future tools, everyone's talking about, obviously funding, and also capacity. staffing capacity to implement these. And one I think that Barnstable's been really interested in is the year-round housing recommendations. It says in the statute that it's for attainable housing. There's a wide variety of opinions on what attainable is across the communities and the advisory council. There's supposed to be a maximum level required by the statute, and the islands, especially in Chatham, are pushing for that to be 250% of AMI, which translates to about a $750,000 house. So we'll see where that comes out. That will draft recommendations, and then defining tiny houses. Like I said, there is conflict between building code, energy and environmental regulations, sanitary code, you name it. And then do they have to be fixed or can they be movable? And artist house eligibility we just talked about. And undersized lots we talked about. And we'll see where that, I think there'll be a distinction between septic and sewer, with sewer lots being no larger than 10,000 square feet, and with septic something that allows 2 to 3 bedrooms, or they may say undersize half of what's currently permitted. And defining year-round residency. A lot of the Lower Cape is looking at 10 months because a lot of their folks go live in the campground or take that time to travel. And so they want 10 months primary residence and 2 months to do what you want. And some exceptions. The year-round housing trusts, we haven't really talked about this in Barnstable, but they'd like to mirror them with the municipal affordable housing trust. The difference is they would be only for year-round housing at a higher income level. And with year-round housing restrictions, and that is another conflict with existing laws. So I think all of this is around, let me get out of there. As you can see, where the regulation working group, we have a lot to work through. The year-round housing restrictions, chapter 184, which is I think starts at section 26 to 32, allows for conservation restrictions, affordable housing restrictions, and there's one more. And if they are not conservation or affordable housing, or maybe it's historic, then they don't meet the definition of perpetual, and the highest restriction would be 30 years. And so because the year-round housing trusts don't want to have an income limit on them, they don't meet the affordable housing definition. So I think we'll get to a point either by statute, there may have to be legislative changes to allow that Mass General Law, Chapter 184, Section 32 to say year-round housing. So that was a really quick blow through it, but happy to answer questions. As I said, the timeline is to have the regulations finished before the end of the calendar year. And when that happens, timeline for asking for designation will have been determined, and Barnstable will then have the chance to ask to be a seasonal community if that's the way the town wants to go. My opinion is that there has to be enough carrots to offset the sticks. So
Good luck. There's a lot there. It's pretty ambitious, I think. Ambitious time. That was gonna be my question, is the timeline. So they're gonna try and have it in place by the end of the year.
I think by statute we have to.
Wow.
So we had to have bylaws by December 15th, and we had a meeting on December 13th to get the
So
bylaws done.
are they gonna have any type of outreach where a municipality can ask for someone that's working on this to come to town council and kind of explain it? Obviously, a blind application to be included isn't palatable.
Oh yeah, this will be definitely socialized, and I think right now these slides that I just showed, they're online. You can look at them, but right now there's just so many questions. These are the recommendations. It's not until the regulations come out and are vetted. So the working group that's doing the regulations will have them finished by July, August, I guess. And then they have to go through um, uh, governor's legal. And when they get through that, that's when they will go public. So the decisions will all be made by the time the regulations come out. These are the recommendations, and then there's the recommendations, and then okay, there's the conflicts. What do we have to unpack to settle the conflicts?
Great. Thanks for
It-
that, Laura. We have any other questions on that for Laura?
Happy to answer anything.
Mark? Yeah.
Great. A lot of work there, Laura. Did you say one of the recommendations was a non-binding referendum? Are they recommending that like the community take a vote on this, or is it just? I know it sounds like the legislative body has the authority to ask for the designation, but is there a recommendation that you get a community vote to support that?
There doesn't have to be. So it would be a recommendation from the town manager to the town council.
Okay.
The town manager has to approve it. And I would expect there'd be a public hearing, but I don't think there has to be. And then it goes to town council where there will be a public hearing. And town council, it's simple majority to accept or to request the designation from the state.
Okay. And I think I've heard like one of the carrots to this is you can increase the residential exemption up to 50%.
Yes.
And are there any other big carrots in there? And what are the biggest sticks?
There's really only the sticks are undersized lots and how that's being buildable. And with that, there's a size limit. So I think it's 1,800 square feet or something like that for a house. And then tiny homes, you have to permit tiny homes. The question is, it doesn't say by right. So you have to permit them, but is it by special permit? And then defining tiny homes that meets sanitary code and building code, I think are going to be the big carrots. The residential exemption is an option. I think they're trying to get the transfer fee approved so that you can, and I think that will be just for seasonal communities. So the town can opt into a real estate transfer fee, and the option, the town would be able to say at what level it starts and at what percent. So it could be, it starts at $1 million, any home that sells for over $1 million, that overage would be, you'd have to pay a fee of 1.5% or whatever. Those two options are locally decided. I
And that would
think,
be restricted for affordable housing.
and that money would be restricted for affordable housing. Yes, yes. I think that's, and then there's some, not a stick, it's not a stick yet. I don't think it's going to be a stick, but there is some talk about if you need a waiver from something, or if you want a waiver from something, then one of the sticks might be that you have to designate a percentage of your short-term rental fees for affordable housing. So most communities do that. We don't, but most communities do a percentage of that for affordable housing. So there's, stay tuned. Obviously, I'm on top of it. I just wanted to bring you guys kind of up to speed of where it is in the timeline for moving forward. The fall is going to be the time when it's going to be, really banging the drums to get communities. I know the commission and others are really supportive in would like all of the communities on the Cape to be involved, because there will be funding. It's just trying to figure out from where yet and for what.
Excellent. Thanks for all of that, Laura. Much
You're
appreciated.
welcome. You're welcome.
All right, item number 6, boards, appointments, reappointments. Jillian, we have anything on this today?
Well, I think you probably have to hold on this one because we don't really have, it was just a draft that Karen had done the last time we had talked about reappointments. That's Karen Nober from the legal department. And it's just consistent with renewing people's appointments. And then obviously I know Mark Ells is seeking another person to fill the vacancy. So we're waiting for that. And I don't think you have to do anything today, just keeping it on the screen.
Fair enough. Item number 7, correspondence and FYIs.
I had included the letter from Jake just because I wasn't sure we were going to be ready today, but everything pulled together and I don't think you have to do anything further on that.
Okay. Items not reasonably anticipated by the chair. Anybody have anything on that? Excellent. How about approval of minutes from 4/4/25 and 5/2/25 trust meetings?
I'd move to approve. Are we taking them both together?
We can.
Yeah, I'm fine doing that.
Well, second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from 4/4/25 and 5/2/25 trust meetings. Roll call vote. Laura Schufelt,
Yes.
Mark Milne,
Yes.
Andy Clyburn, yes. Excellent. Topics for future meetings and agendas.
I did want to circle back to the first thing that we were talking about with the CPA funds that have now been approved, the transfer. I think I probably need to bring back to you an updated NOFA. Or at this point, I guess it doesn't have to be a NOFA. That's entirely up to you guys. But I think we do need to sort of do a little, shaking of the
Okay. Well,
make people aware, basically.
Attorney Galvin's going to be bringing back the amendment that we talked about. Do we need to codify the change that we just approved for the wind project as a policy change? I mean, is there anything in our documentation or in our NOFA where we've historically just given grants that's going to ensure that we have the ability to do these as loans instead of grants?
I think your trust provisions are sufficiently broad enough to give you this authority already.
Okay, good. Any other topics that we want to add on at this time? All right, I did want to have a discussion about upcoming meetings. Without a lot there, we were potentially proposing not to have a meeting in July, but to have our next meeting in August.
Yep, I'm not going to be here, so that works for me.
Good. Well, it was kind of contingent upon whether we actually got through everything on today's agenda, but we did. which is great. So, Jillian, you'll in the coming weeks try to come up with a good date for an August meeting, or do you want to try and pencil that out now?
Well, can I ask, the proposal was just to revert. Last year, we did Mondays, first Mondays at 2 p.m. And I would suggest that could be for July through September and perhaps revisit at that point. But
So that would be August.
yes, that would be August, and September would be the first Mondays at 2 p.m. That would be August. I'm sorry, the date you're looking for.
August 5th.
Yes.
Is that a Tuesday? Oh, you said Monday. I apologize. August 4th.
You just look at a calendar to be sure.
I know
Yeah.
our town council meetings are typically the first and third. Can we maybe do these on the weeks that aren't town council weeks? Either the second or the fourth? Would potentially
Yeah.
the August 11th be a better day?
I'm not, I,
You don't
I'm
want
not fond of 2 o'clock.
Okay.
It kind of kills my day off.
Well,
Mondays are my day off.
let's
So
not hear is,
it's better for me to do it on one of my days off. And
oh, okay.
Mondays and Fridays are my days off. So, but it's better for me to do it in the morning. So then I have the rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I,
Not because it's all about me, but
well, no, it is. I mean, we're municipal employees here, Laura. We're here all the time. So, is Monday or Friday preferable to you? My only thing with, if we're going to continue on Fridays, it would be better for us to do it on the second or fourth weeks.
Yeah. And those, yeah, they work for me either Monday or Friday. If it's in the morning, it's fine.
Mark, do you have a preference, Monday or Friday?
Yeah, I prefer the Fridays. I mean, the Mondays will conflict with holidays too sometimes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about I suggest, moving forward, starting in August, we look at the second Friday of each
Mhm.
month?
So that would be August 8th if we were doing that this August.
Yes.
And did you want to keep a 9 a.m. or did you want to set a different time? Or
Nine.
But
Right.
just to say that wouldn't town council be the 7th?
No, I
August?
think
oh,
think
good point. Yes.
they're only meeting on the 21st in
Yeah,
August.
they only have one meeting in August, so that'll be okay.
Okay.
But
got it.
moving forward after that, let me check.
And
September.
so September would be the second Monday, would be the 8th.
No,
I'm
Friday.
sorry. You
We're
said
talking
Friday. So
Friday,
second
Jillian.
Friday would be the 12th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be an off council week. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
Okay,
do that.
so we'll shoot for the second Friday, 9 a.m., starting in August. Excellent.
Sounds good.
Okay, that's all I had. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn.
Second.
Laura Schufelt,
Yes.
Mark Milne,
Yes.
Andy Clyburn, yes. Have a great weekend.